Rumors around 2005's best-selling memoir, Confessions of a Video Vixen, began long before the book even dropped, with reviewers promising that the juicy details would titillate and provoke the hip-hop world. It was no wonder the book sold over 100,000 copies in the first month of publication alone. Very quickly, responses to the book were divided among polarized camps. At the center of the controversy was author Karrine Steffans, who notoriously named many of her famous sexual conquests in the book, and criticism laced with heavy doses of misogyny labeled her a snitch. Hatred came from all sides, with Steffans being dragged on Tyra.
Karrine Steffans, thank you for being here, and thank you for being honest. You're dying inside, aren't you? I haven't been the hardest on you. I've seen your interviews, and there have been people that are super duper duper hard on you. This was actually a walk in the park.
Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it today.
And even parodied on the Boondocks.
We are back with our guest Chessika Ethelberg, also known as Wonder Cheeks, reading excerpts from her amazing new best-selling book, The Private Lives of Superstar Rappers.
Of all the rappers I met during those years, I loved Gangstalicious the most.
While in a mainstream sense, and especially in most circles of the Black community, Karrine was labeled a snitch and agitator, the book also began to generate a conversation about misogyny and hip-hop in the Black community. For sex-negative feminists and those invested in respectability, the book confirmed the worst beliefs about the Black cultural phenomenon of hip-hop video vixens, the predecessor of influencers and Instagram micro-celebs.
You see a beautiful girl in the Sum 41 video, she's not a video girl. You see a beautiful girl in Justin Timberlake's video, she happens to be a model, but you see a black girl in an LL Cool J video, they want to label her as a video girl.
16 years after Karrine's earth-shattering book, have her most important revelations been addressed on a wide scale in hip-hop and the Black community? And was the book itself a cautionary tale or a juicy tell-all? In this episode of Celebritea, I'll be discussing Confessions of a Video Vixen, Karrine Steffans, and the rise and fall of an era. And early 90s, most videos in the nubile, hip-hop, and parallel R&B genres served up faceless women, usually relegated to the background as accessories, locked in dance routines. Their costumes weren't too risque. Contrast this video with 1989's Me So Horny by 2 Live Crew, which is too grainy to put in here, but had swimsuit-clad women and gyrating. This video foreshadowed the rise of explicitly sexual hip-hop videos in the 90s, followed most notably by 1992's Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot, which, like many of its predecessors, focused on women who were dancing in routines. But by the mid-90s, something was changing. Cameras were spending way longer time on the women just being hot. Take 1995's Doing It by LL Cool J. The camera and LL spend a lot of time ogling at models Pilar Sanders and Talani Rabb. On September 11, 2000, BET's 106 in Park premiered and became the network's #1 show until its cancellation in 2014. Artists having their video appear in the top 10 countdown on 106 and other shows was a crucial component of a successful pre-social media career. Around this same time, hip-hop was being infused with more cash than ever from outside sources. Lucrative endorsements with liquor companies, rising streetwear labels, and other entities were abundant. A 2005 article noticed the rise in product placements in hip-hop songs, noting that Hypnotiq, launched in 2001, by 2005, quote, had been either name-checked in or appeared in the video for 26 different tracks, including 3 by R. Kelly, 2 by Missy Elliott, 1 by Lil' Kim, and 1 by Usher. The drink went from selling 10,000 cases in 2001 and 2 to 700,000 cases in 2003 and 4 without spending a penny on TV or magazine advertising. Record company budgets for flashy and luxury-crammed videos were inflated, and this meant more money and time was spent on finding the creme de la creme of women to appear in videos. And by creme de la creme, it's important that I emphasize that the beauty standard was very exclusive. Even now, it's funny to see people reminisce on the video vixen era as a time when all the women looked different, supposedly unlike today's Instagram models. But when you look back through the videos, it's clear that a certain look was definitely in for the most popular video girls. Slim yet curvaceous, light skin, or if brown skin or dark skin, Eurocentric features, and most notably of all, non-natural hair dominated. And a lot can be said in a future video about the impact on body issues and plastic surgery. But back to casting.
Where did you find her?
Just met her last night.
You hit that?
Nah, I don't think she's like that.
They're all like that, all right? She's like that. She's like that. And I know she like that.
She's gorgeous.
I love her.
One director recalled in the early video days of the 90s, quote, he hired women to assist because men were always a problem because they want to cop all the girls. Because of the commercialization of hip-hop, the casting sets of the early 2000s were usually more professional than the cheap and seedy casting calls of the 90s, though video sets were a different story. It was well known that women on set faced harassment and sexual propositions, usually from emboldened members of artist entourages who would indulge in too much drugs and sponsored liquor. But putting up with such nonsense could net wannabe video vixens a unique type of micro-celebrity that foreshadowed the rise of modern-day social media influencers. To become a video vixen, it was important to be in shape, have trademarks of desirability in hip-hop, think ass, tits, and popping hair, wear the flyest clothes, and exude sexuality and confidence. This obviously meant that becoming a video vixen was an investment. Pictures needed to be taken, surgeries might need to be obtained, and gas or even flight tickets needed to be acquired to attend casting calls, which were notorious for being crowded and ruthless. The investment didn't pay off for everybody, which meant there was a hierarchy of video girls.
Viewer discretion is advised.
For girls who couldn't secure a leading part or supporting role, small checks could be secured in the super seedy and explicit uncut videos that often aired on BET's infamous late night show and were compiled onto DVDs to be sold at gas stations and XXX stores. These girls didn't get craft services or hair and makeup artists, but they were often directed to do wild stunts in pools, strip clubs, and rented mansions. They were also looked at with extreme disgust by the mainstream video vixens and casting directors. But the appeal of women like Melyssa Ford, Gloria Velez, Chessika Cartwright, Buffie the Body, Esther Baxter, and Trey Michelle meant there was a small yet lucrative market for video vixen micro-celebrities. For those of us who came of age in this era, we remember the plethora of party flyers advertising vixens hosting parties and events everywhere from thriving metro areas to tiny backwood towns where trips to Walmart are like trips to the mall. Some vixens, like Buffie the Body in 2006 ATL, ended up in movies, though for some reason I can't find the clip or picture online, so maybe it's the Mandela effect. Buffy also hosted hundreds of parties and parlayed her career into fitness, publishing, and home decor. The world of video modeling also offered coveted covers and spreads of magazines like King, XXL, Smooth, and more. King magazine, arguably the biggest of them all, published 51 issues in nearly 8 years with a circulation of 271,298 at its peak in 2005. It was notable for including high-quality shots of video vixens along with intellectual pieces and GQ-style fashion spreads. But midway through its run, the publishing company pushed the editors to focus on tits and ass. While the editors resisted, the magazine itself spawned more explicit copycats like Black Men, Smooth, and Show. All of the popular vixens of the day posed in all or at least one of these magazines by the end of their career. King was rumored to offer cover models between $5,000 and $8,000 for a shoot, though there are disputes about some of these magazines not paying anything but exposure. Last but not least, if video vixens so chose, they could even meet sponsors, sugar daddies, escort clients, or even eventual husbands. These side hustles were important because though these women served as eye candy, whose absence would render most of these videos dreadfully boring, they were not paid very well. Melyssa Ford, one of the highest paid and featured models of the era, made $4,000 per day for 2-day video shoots. Assuming all her shoots were at least 2 days and that she made that much consistently through her career, the 20 videos she starred in over 5 years earned her $160,000, about $32,000 a year. Don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money, a lot more than bartending, stripping, or really any other kind of similar work for about 40 total 15 to 20 hour work days. And luckily, Melyssa was fortunate enough to be hired for mainstream television work. But that $160,000 didn't include taxes, beauty and grooming, upkeep, and travel. Plus, it was a drop in the bucket compared to the video budgets, and And it was nowhere near the average for video girls who you have to stop and Google image search. Lower level principal video girls could earn as low as $350 a day. The extras, girls who were there to fill in the spaces, got $75 to $150, which was basically nothing after taxes and the grooming necessary to be presentable. In addition to inadequate pay and harassment, video vixens faced a lot of criticism and hatred from respectability enforcers in and outside the black community. Video vixens were assumed to be lost and promiscuous, if not downright hoes, lumped in with groupies who'd hang around or sneak onto set specifically to hook up with artists. But of course, the same disdain was not shown to the male entertainers who frequented the same world, nor was disdain shown for the bevy of sexual harassment and assaults perpetrated by these male stars. Instead, vixens like Buffie, specifically I believe due to colorism, were compared to Sarah Baartman, the 18th century woman known as the Hottentot Venus, whose exploitation at the hands of Europeans is well documented and shameless plug discussed in my book Angry Black Girl. Because of these women's chosen careers, they were often stripped of their ability to speak for themselves and be heard. In 2004, when Nelly's tip drill video came out and the one-day alleged rapist slid a credit card between a girl's butt cheeks, it caused an uproar. Students at the all-women's HBCU Spelman College, who was set to be hosting Nelly for a quote charity event enlisting students for a bone marrow registry, insisted he not be allowed. While some students pointed out that the women, paid from $200 to $2,500 to work for 12 hours, were willing and paid participants, the prevailing attitude was that the entire concept was exploitative and offensive to black women. Please keep in mind that in Georgia, where the minimum wage was $5.15, 12 hours at that rate would have earned those same women $61, and it would be taxed. One Morehouse student named Kenneth Laverne said, "These are grown women. I'm putting the blame on the women," before being loudly booed by the 300 or so women at the meeting. Spelman senior Nicole Howard said, "You have to demand respect, but I doubt these women even thought that they were being disrespected. It makes me sad, makes me realize how much work we have to do to educate women." This demonstrates the infantilizing, chastising attitude displayed towards video vixens and by extension, sex workers, many of whom were simply doing labor for money or the idea of money and security. It makes me sick to my stomach that someone like Charlamagne the God, an admitted rapist and physical assaulter of women who is still dodging accountability for the alleged rape of 15-year-old Jessica Reed in 2001, would act as some sort of moral compass in this early 2000s exchange with video vixen and businesswoman Buffie the Body.
What do you say about people who say you're not that attractive? You just have a body.
I've never heard that before.
You're lying.
No.
Never ever.
Nope.
Never in life.
Never.
Do you ever are you got any acting roles coming? Anything of that nature?
Probably. I'm working on some stuff. I'm working on a lot of stuff right now.
Buffy, I think you're just really milking this 15 minutes of fame thing. That's what I really think.
No. First of all, you don't feel like you ever have to sleep around with the rappers, the artists, the different modeling agencies, the guys who run. You don't have to sleep with those people. Look how far I've gotten, and I haven't had to sleep with anybody.
How far actually have you gotten, Buffy?
Honestly, I don't think I've done anything to degrade myself. I'm not gonna shit on this industry. This industry has been good to me, Buffy later said in a 2007 article. She went further saying, "I think every model should try to do other things. You can't be in a magazine showing your butt forever." The same article was a definite sign of the times, saying venomously, "Her face isn't especially striking. She has never worked out much, and she boasts a diet consisting mainly of salty meats and sugary drinks. But her not exactly model-esque figure is exactly what's in demand for music videos right now." The reality of video vixens' lifestyles behind the glamour of hip-hop videos, along with the criticism they received, would come to a head in 2005 when Karrine Steffans dropped a book that set the streets ablaze. I was where, doing what, with who? Everything that I read disgusted me, Karrine recalled in 2005 when discussing her writing process. From years of journals throughout an abusive childhood, troubled teenage years, and the notorious years on hip-hop sets and hanging out on the party scene, she culled the recollections that became confessions. Steffans was born in St. Thomas of the U.S. Virgin Islands, where she had an abusive and neglectful mother, but at least had the guidance and love of her grandmother. At age 10, she moved to Tampa Bay, Florida, where without her grandmother, she faced worsening abuse abuse and indifference from her mother. Without the love, support, and encouragement of my grandmother, I looked for those things outside the home, she wrote. She stayed out on the streets rather than going to her abusive home, a pattern she would later identify, writing, quote, I would much rather have been on the streets as a derelict than to feel like I was in the way. At age 13, she was raped by the friend of her friend's crush, an emotionally devastating event that was made worse by her mother blaming her for the rape. Quote, she began to punch and kick my head, neck, and chest. She screamed, you smell like sex. You're disgusting. Go take a shower. My mother never once expressed concern or worry about me, never asked if I was all right. She automatically attacked me and made me feel dirty and low, the same way I felt in that motel room. Her mother then made her take a scalding hot shower. After a few years of abuse that eventually led to fighting, threats, running away, and staying with her father and his extended family, Karrine became homeless in Arizona at 16 before dating a man whose mother introduced her to stripping. At just 16, she became Yzette Santiago and began pulling in thousands a night and began mingling with Arizona Cardinals football players. At 17, when she was out as a private dancer, she began dating Kool G Rap, who was 27. He was abusive, insisted Karrine call him daddy, and very soon she was pregnant. He remained abusive throughout the pregnancy, and without a job or money, Karrine was dependent on the increasingly irrelevant rapper. Eventually, she escaped him and later dropped her son off with him on a sidewalk to move unencumbered to LA, where she began fucking Ice-T and Ja Rule. The former she credits with introducing her to the LA social scene. The latter is how she got her nickname, Superhead, which initially began as an inside joke. She also really wanted Fred Durst, who told her, make me come and I'll marry you, before hitting and quitting. She also began dating the just turned 18 Ray J when she was 21. It was during this period that Karrine did a lot of running between all of these men looking for affection and acceptance. But it was her drug-fueled relationship and breakup with Ja Rule that really impacted her. After being triggered by a Father's Day article detailing Ja Rule's wife's second pregnancy, she got jealous and made a scene in a club. He dubbed her, and shortly after, Hype Williams scouted her to be in her next video, Jay-Z's Hey Poppy. Karrine quickly made a name for herself, though she was known as Yzette. She wrote, quote, I did the most outrageous things possible while the other girls proudly sported modest full-back bikinis and one-piece bathing suits. She wrote, the majority of girls on video shoots are reserved and are there strictly to do their jobs. Jay-Z was exceedingly nice to Karrine, and she went on a ride with him. After the chauffeur parked and exited the car, she wrote, quote, Jay pulled out his penis, covered it with a condom, and placed his hand on the back of my head. Karrine rationalized. I was being a good girl, thanking him and proving my worthiness of the kindness he had shown. I was doing what I had been taught. At her next video shoot, titties out and glistening with oil, Karrine basked in the attention and hatred from her fellow video girls. Knowing all the other women hated it heightened my excitement and made me want more of this sort of attention. I never really had girlfriends, so the idea of not getting along with the other girls on set was not a deterrent for me. The next chunk of the book explored Karrine's wild and unexpected behavior on set, exploitation at the hands of major players like Irv Gotti, drug use, and more transactional relationships, like with Shaquille O'Neal. She wrote of Irv, I was his party favor, and I became the new form of payola with label and radio heads. Whenever there was someone who Gotti wanted to impress, he would send me to them and I would take care of them. As her drug problem worsened, she blew her money on an apartment she barely slept in, 3 leased cars, around-the-clock nanny, and drugs. 4 months after she had appeared in A Man Apart with Vin Diesel, she was broke. I had been around the rich and famous so long, I actually began to believe I was one of them, she recalled. She came home one day to an eviction notice and all her luxury cars were gone. She went through her list of men calling for help and none helped. She spent the next 9 months homeless, living with her son in a car, stripping and escorting. It might be around this time that she appeared in a porno with Mr. Marcus, who distributed the film years later after Confessions dropped. She eventually got back cool with Irv Gotti and the Murder Inc. camp before having a drug-induced seizure and again following the same patterns. She wrote, all my life I have been running from one form of abuse to another, and now I was the one abusing myself. So she prays and 2 men come to her rescue. God apparently sends her a 70-year-old Japanese food-loving sugar daddy who gave her $2,500 every Sunday and convinces her to stop stripping. The other was a man who pursued her romantically and helped her get stable housing so she could stop living out of hotels. Now I'm gonna stop summarizing because I've already given quite a bit of spoilers, and if you choose to read or reread this book, the ending isn't ruined for you. There are a lot of solid points about self-esteem and abuse in the book, but this story is about Karrine Steffans, the part-time video vixen, not all video vixens. She was in a few hip-hop videos, but most of her book was about escapades and dates with powerful men in the LA party scene. The things she struggled with were exacerbated by the harsh exploitation of the hip-hop world, but they are things she would have struggled with no matter the profession she was in. Her book inadvertently made all video vixens out to be as troubled as she was, and it's kind of understandable why top billing video vixens who still wanted to work and navigate the misogynistic landscape, like Melyssa Ford, distanced themselves from Karrine, which we'll come back to in a moment. Karrine noted that sex between video girls and rappers was not the norm, but that they were susceptible to the advances of casting directors, crew, and entourage members. The misogyny hurled at Karrine was simply a confirmation of everything already believed about video girls, even the so-called good girls like Melyssa. We've had to listen to rappers brag about their conquest for ages in their music. Karrine is the first female to flip the script and brag about her conquest with actual names, and that's making a lot, and I do mean a lot, of people uncomfortable, a gossip blogger was quoted in a 2005 review. Uncomfortable with the coercive sex, sexual assault, inebriated sex, pimping, etc. Uncomfortable with the poverty, reproductive coercion, and financial and physical abuse that goes unchecked in the book? No, because that was not the conversation being had about confessions. The conversation was harsh, but it was about Karrine and her choice to name names, and not the men who often took advantage of her.
People expect me to be ashamed. And all my life, I've been expected to be ashamed of who I am. And I'm not. And I think that it bothers a lot of people that I'm not ashamed. And a lot of us spend our lives being ashamed of who we are and what we've done and are afraid to share that with our children.
It doesn't bother me that you're not ashamed. I admire the fact that you're not ashamed. I think what bothers me is that I think you are a very smart woman, you're very articulate, and I think you do know exactly what you did. And you knew that naming names would be the thing that makes the press, because you were attracted to that. You're attracted to names, you're attracted to celebrity, and I think you do understand that naming these names means that you know, this is gonna get attention.
Most of the men in the book never responded to allegations, except for notably Bobby Brown. He said, Karrine is a liar. I should sue her, before switching gears and saying, nah, I'll just leave her alone. In barbershops and beauty salons, on radio and talk shows, Karrine was looked at as a hater, a liar, scandalous, and/or a snitch.
I don't know, Karrine, you have angered a lot of folks and a lot of folks' wives. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable, but the things that I left out are way bigger than the things that I put in.
But you keep running from stuff. Like, I wasn't even gonna get at you like that. You know what I mean? But you got problems. You can't keep running.
Karrine's explosive book and her decision to name names has made her public enemy #1 in the hip-hop community.
Peace, Superhead. I'm glad you're doing good with your book, girl, but you're living dangerous. Chill out.
That's just, wow. Whew, I feel bad for those dudes in that book.
Her whole point is she's selling a product, so she's doing whatever she could do to make money and to get notoriety.
My thoughts on Karrine Steffans is that she talks too much. She's basically talking about everything that goes on behind closed doors. That's why they're behind closed doors.
That last clip is basically a gigantic seal of verification that Karrine's horrific experiences were the truth. These quotes demonstrate the misogyny she faced from men, but the pushback from her fellow video vixens was also fierce. Many were eager to emphasize that while they shared the same widely criticized and maligned job as Karrine, they were not addicts, not sex workers, and not promiscuous like her. Though it was their job to be sexy, elicit sexual arousal and responses from men for money, and wear little to no clothing, protecting a sense of morality was important, especially in the super slut-shamey 2000s climate. I can't believe I personally survived. Said Melyssa Ford, I was raised with a certain moral and value system. I was always vocal about my representation. If there was a role that seemed salacious, I would work to get it redone. I was never the good time girl on set. Melyssa further elaborated on Steffans, saying, she has a sense of ownership of who she is. She has no problem admitting she's a whore. Statements like these are often found in other areas of sex work. Think sugar babies who look down on escorts and strippers who look down on cam girls.
Fuck that nigga. He'll be the first one busting another some porn tonight. At least we ain't doing that.
And you best believe the video vixens look down on the strippers just like non-sex worker women look down on the strippers and everybody else. This is whorephobia, the main reason why many people read confessions and walked away feeling like dehumanizing video girls was okay. If no whore is safe from dehumanization and we can all be whores, it would behoove all women to stop putting each other on a totem pole. But this is not a conclusion that Karrine arrived at. Instead, she marketed her book as a cautionary tale and an expose of video girl lifestyles, with her own self-esteem issues and unresolved trauma at the center of the narrative. In interviews, the book seemed to function as a form of therapy and catharsis, in which she was able to look back on her past and reckon with her mistakes. When asked about the men sending her up to $10,000 a month in exchange for sex and whether or not she felt like a prostitute, she said, "Absolutely. I think I have sold so much of myself for so little." She then touched on her childhood. "I never felt pretty or cared for. With these men, I felt glamorous and powerful, and I did feel loved." In another 2005 interview, unforgivingly titled "A Body Lifestyle and How to Shake It," Karrine said, "We know what happens to little black boys that have no dads. We've heard that. We get it. But no one is really saying that young women who were born without fathers have real serious issues, especially when their mother had no father and the mother has issues. When I talk about it, people are actually listening," Steffans explained. Daddy issues? In this society? Groundbreaking. Karrine's precarious and physically abusive living experience with Kool G Rap was made worse by financial abuse, something else that went undiscussed in popular conversations about confessions. But Karrine's emphasis on her superhead nickname, her sexual appetite, and the way she exposed married and taken men worked against her earlier assertions that Confessions was a cautionary tale.
Superhead is a moniker that I gave myself in a personal relationship of mine that I had with an artist, and it was a joke between us based on our love life, and it was all of those things. But unfortunately, it got out, and once it got out, it got misunderstood. You know, I'm not saying it's not true.
Karrine later used superhead as a nickname, taking it back to mean someone with a superior brain, but the name stuck for other reasons. Confessions ends somewhat rushed and unraveled, with a sad chapter about an experience with Usher that makes the reader wonder if Karrine really learned anything at all. Later, when she appeared on Jamie Foxx's radio show and was asked about the state of her vagina, she said it was still super tight and firm enough to snatch off condoms, and that most of the men I know are bigger whores than I've ever been. Steffans also announced she was dating political commentator and somehow unpunished user of the N-word, Bill Maher.
We'd love to have you work in the fields with us. Work in the field? That's part of that. Senator. I'm a house nigga.
Wrote Morali Balaji in Redefining Black Womanhood in Hip-Hop Music Videos. Under the pretense of being a cautionary tale, Steffans glorified the notion of black women compromising their identities and being defined by their sexual prowess. Steffans, who earned the name Superhead for her dalliances with the male performers in whose videos she appeared to promote a how-to of young black women seeking career advancement within the music video modeling industry. Other critics disagreed with this assessment. Wrote Florida newspaper columnist Doug Lyons, "The book is a cautionary tale that contains a timeless message to a new generation of women who believe shaking their rumps on a rap video can lead to a better life. It's not that easy. Too bad Steffans can't get her story on BET Uncut." So, was it a tell-all or a cautionary tale? Is Karrine a reformed hoe or a proud hoe? At some points, Karrine lavishes the reader with gossip and names of luxury items and hotels, while at others she chastises herself for doing drugs, being pimped out, and neglecting her son. Most strikingly to me, there is little remorse or time paid to the women dating the men Karrine at some points feels ashamed for sleeping with. She also makes it clear that she enjoyed making other women around her upset and jealous, one of those hallmark traits of someone with low self-esteem. Later, after the book is published, she makes statements about self-esteem and daddy issues and God and the like, before pulling out declarations that she is sexually liberated and empowered and wants to do the same for other women. But her sexual liberation is mired still in misogyny.
There are girls that want to be taken care of by a celebrity, not realizing that you're a whore. You know,
Plain and simple. That's
when read today, Confessions is still very much a product of its time, but it embodied long-term and wide-scale issues among women in the Black community. Familial and domestic abuse, misogyny, poverty, and more directly, misogyny and rape culture in hip-hop. 16 years later, we're still having some of the same arguments and watching the same kinds of abusers go by unpunished.
Why do females go to school? So they don't have to be videos.
Okay, why do people in general
like
go
you.
to school? Why do people in general go to school?
So they can be successful.
Exactly, so they can live a better life.
So why do you exploit
baby,
your butt?
I already done got there. What's your excuse?
Why do you exploit your butt?
What's your excuse?
Why do you exploit your butt?
What's your excuse?
It's also clear that Karrine was still living through and processing the lessons of her book while in the spotlight, and still making decisions she chastised herself for in her book. Sister Souljah, the urban literature author and rapper, was extremely critical of Steffans, and according to Shamely, suggested that the ending, quote, confirms that Karrine is not yet ready to tell her story until she purges herself from such carnal yearnings. Shout out to Lee for following that with a line reminding Sister Souljah politely to revisit her own memoir, No Disrespect. To quote, remember what she was like as a young, vibrant woman in her early 20s. She was getting it in. Lee dedicated a chapter in his book, Erotic Revolutionaries, Black Women's Sexuality and Pop Culture, to Confessions of a Video Vixen, and detailed how a lot of the vitriol Steffans received in his Black feminist course was from women with massive double standards. When Steffans appeared on Tyra in 2006, she was berated and chastised for her memoir, while Dennis Rodman didn't receive the same treatment.
What mega pop star wanted to have Dennis Rodman's baby? You had relations with her.
Yeah.
And then
I ain't gonna lie, hell yeah.
Watching clips like Tyra's show definitely take me back to being a middle schooler, becoming sexually curious and vilified for my growing body. The misogyny and shame that permeated my school, my community, and even my own household at times was the norm, and it was violent. Girls today aren't growing up with the same level of bullshit, though it exists, but it wasn't like 05 levels. I have to give credit to Karrine for her bravery, even if the book's intention remains murky. Confessions sizzled and simmered on the scene as the internet became more available and the 2008 recession hit the hip-hop world and America at large. Video budgets were slashed by the end of the decade as creativity and frugality became the name of the game. In the words of culture writer Yo Phillips, quote, Hype Williams went from exotic islands to green screen studios. MySpace honeys and reality show wannabes looking for a little bit of exposure were easily persuaded to be music video eye candy, while top video girls like Melyssa were suddenly being offered the kind of money that their lessers would receive, clearly showing that the era was coming to an end. By early 2009, accompanying industries were already going down. King magazine editors were circulating internal memos about the publication's final issue, joining over 428 magazines to go under. This clearly was a mix of the video vixen era ending and the explosion of internet blogs delivering a death blow to the print media industry. But video vixens would reemerge from the ashes on social media, even if their reputations would eventually take a hit from GoFundMe please and OnlyFans links during the 2020 pandemic. Music videos are no longer the main arena of fandom and obsession for hip-hop celebs. Social media is. So modern social media vixens are the next step in the evolution of women who appear to be glamorous, sexually liberated, and gorgeous. But there's less exclusivity, meaning there's beauties and personalities of all types, and there are more direct ways to make money with adoring fans and brands. Melyssa Fort's $2,000 per day and small collection of $5,000 magazine shoots pale in comparison to the money brought in by today's IG stars and YouTubers who make a living monetizing sex, pushing products, fraternizing with rappers, and pushing the bounds of respectability politics. Some even still appear in music videos, but it's small change compared to the money they can make branding themselves. They can even, like in the case of video models Black China and Ruby Rose, become the problematic, and I cannot stress this enough, rappers themselves. And even more noteworthy, female rappers have themselves become the vixens depicted in their art, challenging the argument that they are being exploited when they choose to do it for themselves without centering the male gaze. It definitely makes me curious to see the next evolution of vixens, particularly in the Black community. Like I said before, I think Karrine Steffans' book was a super brave thing to do. It's hard to imagine it and relive it now just how slut-shamey and whorephobic the 2000s were as a proud sex worker in 2021. But let's think about it. 2006 was just 8 years removed from the Monica Lewinsky scandal, in which the abuse of power by President Bill Clinton of a powerless young intern was viewed as a joke that earned Lewinsky ridicule and endless smearing. It was around the time that a female celebrity sex tape was viewed as entertainment instead of revenge porn. It was 6 years before a public gang rape case in Steubenville, Ohio, divided onlookers and reminded feminists that rape was still not taken seriously. It was over a decade before the majority of the black community finally turned on R. Kelly after years of rumors and downright knowledge that he sexually abused teenagers, who were often blamed as fast. So yes, it took a lot of guts for Karrine, as flawed as she is, to dare to discuss toxic behavior in hip-hop and the abuse that led to her questionable life choices. Years before Me Too, she dared to blow the lid on the abuse of power that happened behind the scenes of glamorous video vixens. If Steffans released her book today, it would have nowhere near the impact it did in 2005 because not enough people were daring to discuss such things. Today, these kinds of exposés happen regularly, with even worse behavior and still very few consequences. There were feminists and others who publicly criticized hip-hop back when Karrine's book dropped, but they never belonged to that world in the way that Karrine did. Today, Karrine remains a controversial author and woman often entangled in drama, from her continued publicized exploits with married men, her tumultuous marriages to the guy who played Eddie Winslow in Columbus Short from Scandal, to assertions that everything about her Confessions era was fake and contrived for publicity, to a weird video in which she declares that she'll cheat on any present or future husband for Lil Wayne, a recurring sex partner.
So he's always been part of my relationship. So when I get into a relationship, like Wayne will call the house at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and I will answer. And if he says I'm at the skate park or I'm here, I will get up and I will go. That's what's going to happen. And you've got to be okay with that.
Lil Wayne? Lil Wayne? Oh my God, Lil Wayne. Oh, that's nasty. I find it interesting, to say the least, that after initially acknowledging that in her relationships with high-profile men that they were taking advantage of her, she released a 2010 manual on how to entice and seduce such men. In 2015, she released a 10-year anniversary memoir, Vindicated. In it, she details the continued cycles of abuse and mistakes that continue to color her life. Ultimately, Confessions of a Video Vixen is an iconic book that subverts both the tell-all and the cautionary tale genres, that ultimately gave a lifelong hustler and survivor of abuse a permanent plate to eat from, a journey that she could monetize through the written word. The material is as flawed and entertaining as the author. Isn't that like most hip-hop?
We can't sit here and focus on the video people as exploitation for girls. Let's shut down all the porno shops. Let's shut down every strip club in America. Let's clean up prostitution. If that's the case, we got a lot of things to do.
As for video vixens themselves, I have long seen them as straddling the line in the public's eye as somewhere between performers and sex workers. Situated in social currency below actors and fashion models, but above phone sex operators and strippers, two other groups of erotic laborers who benefit from not wearing the sex worker label, which defined means, quote, adults who receive money or goods in exchange for consensual sexual services or erotic performances, either regularly or occasionally. I'm sure the comments will include someone bringing up what is tasteful and classy versus lewd and obscene, so I will say that yes, not all video vixens showed a lot of skin, but for the ones who teased and titillated to music about sex, they live in the same world of sexualized performance and fantasy in exchange for money. Whether or not they stripped before like Buffy or escorted on the side like or did nothing but twerk in bikinis, they were viewed by many in society as being hoes, willing to use their bodies to make a living. Like any other erotic laborer living in a vastly unequal society that places a premium on beauty, sexual virility in men, and sex in general, the consensual participation in a flawed system does not cancel out abuse or give a green light to dehumanize someone. It's seems like more of us are waking up to this, but every time a major story breaks surrounding sexual or physical abuse, devastating viral responses remind me we still have a long way to go. The issues that femme erotic laborers face, like my OnlyFans friends being revenge porned, like Karrine being pimped out and abused, like the so-called good video vixens being harassed on set, these things exist no matter the industry women choose to partake in. Why? Because misogyny, the hatred and oppression of women, has existed for centuries. So of course hip-hop and every other genre, and even every other industry, still grapples with it today in the social media age.